Rochelle Bilow, welcome to the Other 51. Thanks for joining me this morning.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited.
So we were just talking before we hit record with the requisite "Are you a Hamilton fan?" question that I ask everyone who joins the podcast. And you were saying you are not necessarily a musical fan, but you have a book recommendation for us. So we can start off with that.
I do. I feel like it's always a good way to start any conversation is with a book recommendation. My good friend Jeff Wilser is a really extraordinary writer, and I always joke he's the only writer that when he has a success, I feel pride and excited for him, not jealousy. He's just that good. He wrote a book called Alexander Hamilton's Guide to Life, and so it's part biography, and it tells the story of Alexander Hamilton. He also takes his values and kind of just puts them in the modern age, and basically, I think, how could I spin this book in another way? An alternative title could be, what would Alexander Hamilton do? So it tells you how to get ahead in work and life and love, and it's also just a good frolicking read. So definitely recommend Alexander Hamilton's Guide to Life by Jeff Wilser.
Well, that's awesome.
Now he owes me a present.
Well, it's awesome because you are on this podcast in part because of a recommendation of a previous guest on the show, our mutual friend Leah Stacey, who was on, I want to say, episode 7, way back in season 1. But she talked about your book, The Call of the Farm, which I read and really, really enjoyed. We can talk about that. We'll talk about that book a little bit. So you are kind of the first, second generation guest we've had on here.
All right, I'll take it. And also, I mean, being connection to Ms. Leah Stacey is a connection that I am proud to have. She is a great person.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking before, and you just recently moved back from Brooklyn to, well, not recently, over the summer, but you made the move back to Central New York to the Syracuse area.
That's true. I just can't stay away.
So coming back home again, what's that like for you? Maybe not just personally, but kind of as a writer professionally. Like what's the difference being a writer in Brooklyn versus being a writer in Syracuse?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. So interestingly enough, I tried to be a writer in Syracuse years ago. Because I'm very old now. I'm about to turn 30. I tried to be a freelance writer in Syracuse when I was about 22, 23 years old. And being completely frank, it did not work. You know, I was basically a secretary and a dance teacher and everything but a writer. This time around is different because I had such an incredible experience as a writer in New York for 3 years. So I worked for Bon Appetit magazine, and I'm so lucky that I have made some extraordinary connections there. So being in Syracuse, it feels less like, oh, I'm based in Syracuse. It's now, I'm a writer, so it doesn't necessarily matter where I'm based out of. But it was just a matter of getting those connections. I got to tell you, it's real hard to freelance if you don't know who to email and pitch.
And what are some of the, so for, I've talked to freelance writers on this before, and it feels like, I've always felt like that's like the golden dream for all writers, like to be the freelance writer, live wherever, have no boss, and kind of do your own thing. And man, it's a grind to be a freelance writer. I mean, it is way harder, I think, than a lot of especially young writers probably think.
Totally. I mean, the thing is, that's such a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. One, you have to be able to hustle. If you can't sell yourself and go out and be proactive in pitching publications, if you just wait for a publication to come to you, it's certainly not going to work. The other thing that I think it's helpful for me to keep in mind is every job has pros and cons. So although there are some really awesome things about being a freelance writer, there are also some pretty crappy things too, just in the way that working a 9-to-5 in an office has positive things and benefits, like actual benefits. And it has some negatives too. So I think for me, the negatives of working freelance were less negative than the negatives of working in an office. So it's, you know, is it a perfect life? No, but was I, you know, driving around with my windows down in the bizarre 60-degree weather yesterday at 2 p.m.? Yes. So it's, you know, it's a trade-off for sure. But that also does mean that I'm often working on Saturday morning or Sunday evening. So, you know, trade-offs.
Right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your book, Call of the Farm. How long ago did that come out? Do you remember?
September 2014.
2014. Okay. Like I said, I read it on Leah's recommendation. She recommended this. It was episode 8. Not that anybody cares, but it was episode 8 that she was on. And one of the most interesting things I found about the book was the complete lack of exposition. I think I was, you know, I knew your general backstory, that you had gone to culinary school and that you came back up into work at the farm up in, was it up in Syracuse?
Casanova.
But yeah, Casanova. Yeah, that's right. But so I was expecting kind of like the little, here's how I got here, and then here's how I got to the farm. And no, it's like page 2. I'm at the farm and I'm working, and there's not really any kind of flashbacks. I found that really interesting and kind of refreshing to not have like the whole story before the story begins. So how did you decide as a writer that that's how you were going to frame the book?
No one's ever asked me that question or noticed that about the book before. But it's definitely a conscious choice that I made. Ultimately, I felt like the people who read the book wanted to read a book about farming and falling in love and what it was like to be in this experience. Mm-hmm. They weren't people who signed up to read Rochelle Bilow's memoir of her life. Mm-hmm. So I felt like it would be doing a disservice to the reader to like color my backstory with irrelevant information. You know, there's certainly parts of my past and, you know, character details that I needed to share to give a richer experience of the character that I was. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, the fact that my father grew up on a farm, mm-hmm. and that was really relevant to who I became and who I was on that farm. But, you know, just my whole background of like being in culinary school and doing everything that I did before I came to the farm, I felt like if it wasn't relevant to the story and to the characters, then this just wasn't the place for it. Mm-hmm. It just felt like, almost like including it would be a little too navel-gazing, and the book already walks that line. So, you know, I figured if I could have a little bit of self-restraint, I would.
Yeah, it's almost novel-esque in that way. It kind of trims out all the unnecessary stuff and focuses. It's very focused on this year, or however long you were at the farm, and kind of very focused on that. And that was a conscious choice, you said, that you made in writing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I really wanted it to tell a snapshot of my life at the time. You know, a lot of the criticism that I had received was, you're too young to write a memoir. And my response was, at the time, you know, well, this isn't like my life story and here's everything that I learned about life and being a human on this earth, which many memoirs do attempt to do. This was just a story. Mm-hmm. And it reads like a romance novel, but it's real and true. So, yeah, I don't know what genre that is.
How did you decide that that was a book you were going to write?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to write a book. That was just, you know, I'm a writer. It's like, oh, right, like, write a book. That's the ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know what my book would be. Nothing really spoke to me in the way that they say when you meet your life partner, you just know. Or, you know, if you make a major decision based on intuition, you just know. That never happened for me. And while I was living the experience, while I was on the farm, spoiler alert, my farmer boyfriend breaks up with me. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone who picks up the book. When our relationship ended, I was left kind of adrift, and I felt like I was very confused because I had thrown myself into farming and all of a sudden was self-identifying as a farmer, but realized that's not who I had started the experience as. Mm-hmm. And I had this moment of realization and remembrance that I was a writer. And so I felt like the goal would be to marry those two experiences, farming, which felt so immediately relevant to who I was at that time, and writing, which was who I had always been. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I just realized that this would be my book.
So how long did it take you to write? What was your actual process for sitting down and writing it? Because it does have a very, confessional is not the right word, but diary, like very intimate feel to it. Like it feels it's very written, very in the moment. It feels very, like you said, like a snapshot of the story that you're telling. So were you calling from like journals and stuff you had written at the time? Was it a sit down and get it all out in a big burst? What was that process, the actual writing process like?
Yeah, so I actually wrote the proposal first.
Okay.
And so I pitched the proposal to my agent, Distil and Goderich, who they were not my agent at the time, but a wonderful agent there, Rachel Stout, who now has since left the agency, but she picked up the project. And so Rachel and I spent a few months working on the proposal together and really finessing it. And we ended up submitting about a 70-page proposal to a handful of publishers. And well, so what actually happened was they teased the project in their newsletter. And a handful of publishers asked to see the proposal, and we got an offer from my publisher, The Experiment, and that was in late September of 2013. And they said, so we want to buy this book, but we want it to be out on shelves in the fall of next year. So chop, chop. Have a draft to us by late December. And me never having written a book before, I was like, oh, sure, I can totally do that. And that's insane. I'm happy that they pushed me. But I also had a full-time job at the time. I was an editor at a lifestyle website. And I wrote like, I don't remember my final word count. It's somewhere in the 80 to 90 range. But I wrote like a full book in 3 months, which is not normal. I don't recommend it. But so it really was, like I would write all weekend long and in the evenings, and I was pulling from a diary. I think I actually directly quote the diary and journal in some portions of the book, but also it was so fresh in my mind that I did have that going for me too. I felt like I was able to give a richer, more colorful experience because the conversations and the events and places were still so very vivid in my mind. So in that way, I think it was actually a blessing that I had to write the book so quickly.
When you finished, like maybe the first draft and got it done, given the personal nature of the story, did it feel cathartic? Was there a sense of kind of big sigh when you're done, or is it because it was a project kind of a little divorced from it that way?
Oh, interesting question. I think throughout the entire process, I thought of the character of Rochelle in the book as a character.
Okay.
She is me, but the way that I wrote her and handled her character arc was really just trying to tell a complete and cohesive and honest story. So I did feel actually removed. By the time I submitted my first draft, I felt very removed from the story in the way that I was the storyteller. And I wasn't, necessarily writing a blog about my life or my feelings. I felt like it was really important to treat everyone in the book as characters because, for example, a lot of the criticism, if you hop over on Amazon.com, is that the character of Rochelle is pretty weak-willed. She's not a very strong character. She doesn't stand up for herself in this relationship, and that's frustrating to many people. But to me, that was a choice I made because I wanted to take the responsibility that I owed in our situation. I didn't want to write a book that said, look at this terrible guy and how badly he treated me and how sad I was, because it takes two people to make a relationship go wrong. So I wanted to be honest about my shortcomings. And I think it was easier to do that from a place of distance.
Right. And it's, and I want to get back to this thinking of yourself as a character thing, because I think it's super interesting. But I did see some of the reviews and the weak character, and like Rochelle is so weak, blah, 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 blah. And that's almost funny in a way, because it's not like a character was invented and, well, this is a flaw in a fictional character that you have to fix. It's your life. It's, you know, kind of an honest depiction of who you were at this time. So,
you won't understand this, but if you've ever been a 24-year-old woman in love, I mean, that's pretty much what it's like.
No, I honestly can say I've never been a 24-year-old woman in love. So, so when you go about the thinking of yourself as a character in this, like, how did that happen? I mean, did you was that you talk about it being a decision, but as you're writing and as you're doing it, like, how do you pull that off?
I actually wrote down character descriptions for all of the main characters in the book. And for myself, I just tried to look at myself with a little distance and write down the things that Rochelle loved and the things Rochelle was afraid of and the formative experiences in her life. And of course, that was all true. And I had the easy task of just knowing it because it was my experience, and not having to necessarily be creative and concoct a story. But I did write it down, and when I wrote scenes and dialogue, I really tried to pull from that fountain of knowledge and make Rochelle speak in a way that was true to the person that I wanted her to be portrayed as. So it was less like, how do I feel? And more, I was a little more scientific about it, I think, than writing in my diary.
What was the reaction to the people on the farm and who were in the other characters in the book, the other people? What was their reaction to the book?
Well, the character of Ian is such a good sport. I mean, bless his heart. I gave the book to him in advance because I felt like I owed it to him to give him the chance to read the book and process it before he had to talk about it with other people. And I think he was so gracious about it. He said, I think his exact words were, "It was funny, interesting, and well written." And we're in a great place now. He actually has his own farm and a beautiful family, and I'm so happy for him. So all good things there. His opinion really meant the most to me. I just wanted to tell our story in a way that felt honest, and it was sad and a little messed up, but it was also really beautiful at times, and I wanted to pay respect to that. So his reaction meant the most to me. The other farm, I haven't spoken to every single person in the book. I know the character of Toby. If you read the book, he's the dairy manager. Mm-hmm. He actually went through and he read it on an e-reader and did a search for his name, and the only part that he read were the parts that he was
That's
in.
funny.
And I think his response was, he was like, "I'm totally the nice guy in this book." So that was his reaction. And then the characters of Cliff and Lara pointed out that I totally unintentionally, the names were all fabricated, sure, except for mine and my friend Tracy. We were the only real names in the book. But the character of Lara pointed out that I accidentally named her and Cliff after granola bars.
Oh, we totally do. Yeah.
Cliff Lara bar.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to, but I guess that was my subconscious. I must have been hungry when I named that.
So pulling out a little broader from your actual book, Leah and I talked about this in our episode, and I'd love to get your opinion on it too. What is it about food writing and stories about food that captivate us so much?
I think because they're not really about food. They're about everything else. They're about loneliness or sensuality or family or our fears, and food is just a way to talk about those scary or embarrassing topics without actually having to talk about them.
Interesting.
That's what I think. But I'm an emotional person. Take that for what it's worth.
Right. So do you have a favorite cookbook?
Oh, Give me a moment. I should have been expecting this question, but I was.
So I'll give you my two, just as while you think, and kind of give you inspiration. For like actual cooking, like actual day-to-day cooking stuff, it's the joy of cooking. I mean, that's, the standard by which all are measured, and I find myself using that most on a day-to-day basis when I need a recipe for something. When I'm not looking it up online, I usually use Joy of Cooking. But one of my favorite cookbooks to like read and browse through, and when I get the courage to actually cook something, I will, is Ruhlman's 20. It's one of Mike Ruhlman's books, and he goes through the 20 basic cooking techniques or ingredient, like the 20 foundational things that all cooks must know, like water, like how to boil, how to steam, sauteing, and like really breaking it down, and as he does, kind of scientifically, and like what each one does and their recipes. And it's just so beautifully laid out. It's a beautiful book, and my favorite part of that is the first chapter of it is the first step is to think. And about like thinking through a recipe, making sure your mise en place is set up. And I love the idea of mise en place in general. But I just love that idea. Like it all kind of starts back to kind of thinking through what the meal is going to be, what you want to serve, like what the outcome is supposed to be, all of that, and getting everything ready before you actually cook. So.
Oh, interesting. Because, so I will say I very, very rarely use cookbooks. And I think that's because I did go through culinary school and worked as a line cook. So in terms of techniques, like those are things that I have in my brain toolkit at this point. If I want to braise something, I know how to do that. If I want to roast something, I know how to do that.
Right.
So I don't typically use cookbooks on the daily, but there are a few cookbooks that I think have just influenced my style.
Okay.
In terms of flavors and less technique and more flavor and ingredient based. And I would say the number one in that category is Yotam Ottolenghi's Jerusalem.
Okay.
I mean, the man just does such beautiful things to vegetables, and the dishes are all so colorful and so healthy, but healthy in a way that is maybe not so akin to our American view of what healthy means, which is like low fat and salad.
Right.
Or maybe that was our view in the 1980s. It's changing now. But it's just like he uses whole, real ingredients and like beautiful full fat yogurt slick with extra virgin olive oil, and then he like throws pomegranate seeds on it, and it's just bright and colorful and beautiful and fresh and everything that I want to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if I could cook like Ottolenghi, I will have accomplished something great. I think I might go through and make something out of that cookbook for dinner tonight. You've inspired me.
Oh, awesome. So we'll get back to writing in a second, but if anybody listening wants to become a better cook, like maybe improve 10%, like on another show I do, the host and I, we often talk about the difference between making dinner and cooking dinner. Like making dinner is just kind of throwing something together and heating it up, and and that can be absolutely fine most nights. But on nights that you want to cook, or if you want to like improve like a little bit, like 5 or 10%, what's one thing that people, or a couple things that people should know?
Okay, one is if you're using a recipe, truly read the recipe in full before you go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way there are no surprises, and you're not like, oh, shit, sorry, can I swear?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, shit, darn it, I needed shallots, or realizing that you've got the timing all off. So I think, one, just having the patience to read through an entire recipe and take a moment to understand. I think that's really helpful. Mm-hmm. And this goes hand in hand with having the patience. I would say to be a better cook, when you cook, just cook. Don't be distracted. Don't all of a sudden pick up your phone and start scrolling through Instagram, or have the TV on in the background, or, just like focus on what you're doing, and you'll observe so much more, and then learn so much more. You'll notice that after, a minute and a half, garlic is starting to burn. And so next time, maybe you won't keep the flame on as high, or you won't put the garlic in so early. But if you're distracted by how many likes your Snapchat story got or whatever, you're not going to notice that. And you're also cheating yourself of the experience of cooking.
There's a great scene. It's in the credits of the movie Chef, which is one of my favorite movies, and it's Jon Favreau learning from Roy Choi, who was the like chef. He was teaching Jon Favreau how to cook for the movie, and they were making a grilled cheese sandwich, and it was like the focus that Roy had on making the grilled cheese. I remember him saying to Jon Favreau, "Nothing exists in the world but you and this sandwich right now."
Oh, I love that.
And it's just, it's just a grilled cheese sandwich, but that level of focus and level of attention always stuck with me after that. So, so you're back up in Central New York now. What kind of writing are you doing now?
I am focusing on, we'll say, whole self wellness. Okay. So food is always going to be a huge part of my life because I'm a person and have to eat. But no, I mean, like cooking and sharing recipes, that is always going to be the bulk of the writing that I do. But I'm also working toward my yoga teacher certification right now. And so the teachings of a yogic practice are very much on my mind. And also just what does it mean to be a healthy person in terms of the spaces that we live in and the people we interact with and the way that we approach things. And I'm really exploring health from a larger sense now. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out. I don't really know yet, but I'm less interested in food and more interested in health at this point.
Oh, that sounds really cool. That sounds really like an interesting area, and it seems to be, not that this should drive writing decisions, but it seems popular. It seems like a lot more people are thinking holistically about health or thinking about health just beyond eating a salad at dinner or going for a walk around the block. Not that those aren't good, but, kind of thinking about, I like that, broadening the definition of what it means to be healthy just beyond kind of the food you eat.
Right. And it's certainly a huge part of it, but I think it's just, we can't consider it in isolation anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be the task of my life, I think.
What's the best thing you've read recently?
I recently read, a great, hilarious, like, riotously funny book called The Portable Veblen.
Okay.
The author is Elizabeth Mackenzie, and she has written for The New Yorker, so she has that very intellectual humor to her writing, and it's a love story, but it's about how our families influence who we are and how we show up in relationships. And so it's funny and honest and weird and wacky. And if you like squirrels or if you don't like squirrels, I think you'll find a lot to be interested in the book. So I'll leave it very vague and open-ended there, but highly recommended. The Portable Veblen.
Yeah, you've intrigued me with the squirrels.
Yeah, you're like, I didn't see that coming in.
No, and that's only funny because one of the comic books that's on my list to read is the Unforgettable Adventures of Squirrel Girl. So like squirrels are apparently it now. They might be popular.
You heard it here first.
The one thing I can recommend, it's not as funny, but I think it is a remarkable piece. It was on the Pacific Standard this week, on the Milo bus with the Lost Boys of America's New Right. And it was a author or writer, Laura Penny, and she spent time traveling with Milo Yiannopoulos, however you pronounce his last name. And the boy, and like the young 18, 19-year-old young boys that travel with him. And she was at Berkeley when all this happened. And just kind of it portraying everything that's happened to him in the past week. We're recording this end of February. And so when like everything hit the fan with Milo, and just kind of depicting the young men and boys who are around him and kind of like their reaction and kind of what happens when this kind of iconic / troll / kind of very polarizing figure has a very public fall and what it happens to him. It's a long read, but it's a really, really fascinating story.
That sounds awesome. And you know what I have to say too? this is tangential, but since when did we have to start qualifying things as long reads? Like, just so you know, you're going to have to commit your attention to this for a little while. It's just like...
I tend to do that more on Facebook when I post things, just as a, hey, don't click this thinking you can skim it and be done. Like, this is good, but make sure you have time to give it. It's more, I almost look at it as, I'm respecting the people who I'm sharing this with, saying you're gonna need some time with this, but it's going to be worth it. So more as a heads up rather than they click in like, oh my God, this is so long, I can't read it, which is not a great thing, but
Well, now you made me sound like an asshole.
Sorry about that.
No, I like that way of looking at it.
Yeah, and no, I don't. Well, and I'm not a big fan of the let's tag this as long reads or long form, and like having to brand something that has 5,000 words or more as a certain thing. Like, right. The story should be as long as it needs to be. So,
okay. I like that. All right. Well, we'll find a common ground.
There we go. Real quick, just because as a food person, we'll throw this question at you related to what I just asked. But what is the best thing you've eaten recently?
Oh, best thing that I've eaten recently. Oh, I do actually have a great answer for this. I don't eat meat often. I'm by no means a vegetarian or vegan, but I just have a hard time consuming meat that I don't really know where it came from in that obnoxious, like, Portlandia skit way. But, I mean, having worked on a farm where we raised and slaughtered and butchered our own meat, that just really changed my attitude toward the meat that I choose to consume.
Sure.
So when I do, I go big and I really make it count. I'm not throwing bacon on everything, but on Saturday night, I had really amazing ribeye steak, and I seared it to like the most perfect medium rare that I think I've ever gotten in my life. And this is after having worked in restaurants and in culinary school, and like, I don't know, the force was with me on Saturday. So I made this awesome steak and had a bitter green salad with it and like 87 glasses of wine. It was just like the perfect meal. I was so happy. I'm still thinking about it.
And to kind of your point on the long form, I always find it funny that people who will say, I don't eat meat a lot, but are very quick to say, well, I'm not a vegetarian, I'm not a vegan. I'm not one of those people, but... I
was one of those people for a long time. I was vegetarian and vegan for a long time. And now I have a hard time labeling myself because I don't follow any diet. I'm more just an intuitive eater. I eat what my body tells me to eat. So... I love vegetarians and vegans. I know many of them, and I eat a crap ton of vegetables, but I want to be clear, especially because I am in yoga land. Okay. I think it is kind of a qualifier that I have to say, like, I do eat meat, guys, just so you know, but it's quality meat.
If people want to find your writing or find what you're up to, where can they find you?
Well, so I have a website, which is my name with a hyphen in the middle.com. So that's Rochelle-Bilow.com. And pretty much across the map, I was very unimaginative with my handles. So on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, you can find me at Rochelle Bilow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
But send me a Facebook friend request because I'm very adamant that is friends and family only. Okay. I have to have some levels of control here.
Absolutely. We get that. So, well, Rochelle, thanks for joining me today. This was a lot of fun.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.